Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm your host, Amanda Farmer, and my guest this week is Chris Miller. Chris Miller is the Director of Business Development for Vantage Strata, having transitioned from the role of CEO in 2023. After founding and scaling Vantage from 2 to over 80 employees, Chris is now channeling his experience and insights into non-executive directorship roles. His journey in property and strata management, coupled with a focus on operational innovation, site procurement, capital raising, project delivery, and government relations, now equips him to offer strategic guidance and fresh perspectives in various business environments. I invited Chris on the show to share just one of those fresh perspectives with us, well timed for the new year. I'll take you over now to my chat with Chris Miller. Chris Miller, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Great to have you back, Chris. It's been a number of years since we've had a chat here on the show. I know you've been up to all sorts of creative things, as you like to do. And you're back because I came across a white paper, you're calling it, that you, or Vantage Strata more accurately, has put out there. Maybe a bit of a contrarian view. Thought I'd bring you on and dig into it.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's published by Vantage Strata. I mean, I was the author of it for the most part. I had a bit of help polishing it up, but I try to write a white paper or two every year. I think more recent ones have been focusing on the housing crisis and the role strata needs to play in that. And in the past, it was trying to deal with things arising from the COVID pandemic, and particularly whether we were going to sail off a cliff in terms of affordability for strata levies, and there's a lot of predictions around that stuff. So usually I try to pick something that's topical and of its time, and on this occasion I am actually drawn towards a subject that is a bit controversial. I know everyone's talking about the Four Corners stuff and strata managers getting additional fees and hidden kickbacks and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. I certainly understand why that stinks, but I don't think the topic should be radioactive. I mean, if it's radioactive, then, so is uranium. Used correctly, it can power a whole city, right? So that's a question I think we need to be engaging in. It's really a matter of not being frightened of the idea that there's opportunities to make additional revenue streams. It's really about how you do that, and are you doing it by adding value, and are you doing it transparently? I think if you do those two things, then I think you probably tick the boxes that you need to.
Well, let's get into it. Your white paper is titled Leveraging Collective Buying Power in Strata Communities. And part of the paper refers to strata management reimagined. I want to start there. Why do you say that strata management needs to be reimagined?
Well, look, there is actually a crisis occurring in the strata management industry at the moment in terms of profitability. Now, it's popular. I'm sure the peanut gallery, you read the comments on people's blogs and posts, and it's, no shortage of owners saying, strata managers are just making millions of dollars and driving around in their Ferraris and.
I think it was a Lamborghini and a super yacht.
Now, you can cherry pick some examples and then try to make the argument that that applies to the whole of the industry. The truth is the opposite is true. Revenues are growing consistently and have been over the last couple of decades, but profits are being squashed. The cost of servicing strata communities is growing at an exponential rate or an alarming rate. And I don't imagine there's going to be a great deal of sympathy from the kinds of people that normally comment on those things. But, the truth happens to be a pretty good defence. That is the case. Macquarie Bank do benchmarking that's really clear on this subject. The cost of servicing is going up and the profits are being squeezed. Now we're facing the potential prospect that insurance commissions may be removed or banned or eliminated. I will go on record as saying I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think we've got this weird sort of Frankenstein arrangement that has just evolved in the strata industry where we rely, some businesses, make up all of their profit will be gone if they don't have those insurance commissions. And whilst it might be cathartic for people to say, good, the greedy buggers, get rid of the strata managers, I can tell you now, if the strata management industry disappeared tomorrow, it would not be a great outcome for the people living in strata buildings. Whether you like it or not, strata management is needed, and we need these businesses to be viable. Now, those businesses that you hear about where they're driving around Lamborghinis or whatever, they're such marginal examples. The vast majority are really battling to make the sorts of profit that you need to make if you're in business. When you start getting down to 10%, 8% profitability, you may as well put your money in a commercial property investment that's no risk, and you don't have to deal with all of the problems of payroll and HR and hiring and firing and all the stresses that come with running a business. So the reason I've said I think strata management needs reimagining is, A, we need to deal with that profitability squeeze issue. And I think we need to confront the reality that we may have a significant proportion of our revenue, traditional revenue, disappear if insurance commissions are gone. And we need to find ways to replace that. Now, you can either do that just by charging the client more money. It's probably what most people are thinking about. That's their break glass in case of emergency plan. If we lose $100 per lot in insurance revenue, what do we do? Well, it's just going to be an increase of $100 per lot in strata management fees. That sort of makes sense, unpopular as it may be. That'll be necessary for many businesses to survive. But I think there are additional opportunities if we look in the periphery, and that's why it's a contrarian view, the idea that we could be helping provide additional services that aren't core strata management services, and we could be getting paid for doing that.
We're definitely going to get into that. Let's ease in first by unpacking, if we can, this concept of collective buying power and collective buying opportunities, because as I read through your white paper, I can see how there has to be a bit of an understanding and a bit of an acceptance, I guess, of those ideas that there are collective buying opportunities in strata. What does that mean to you?
Strata building is more than just an owner's corporation that is established to make sure it pays its bills and collects money and enforces its rules. That's what the owner's corporation is there for. But each of these buildings really is a little micro economy. There is a collection of people living in a really small concentrated space, and there are a number of things that they all need to do that are identical. And some of those things are driven obviously by best practice, but some of these things are driven by statute, and they all have to do them. I'll give you a really good example. I think this is the case nationally, but certainly in the ACT and New South Wales. If you rent your apartment out to a tenant, by statute, you must get your smoke detectors tested, and I think have the batteries tested or replaced annually. You have to do it. Now, in most buildings, this is very sort of generalisation. I'm sure it's very different, some buildings to others, but generally speaking, most buildings have 40, 50, sometimes 60% rentals. So I can tell you that within these buildings, 60% of the unit owners rent their apartment out, and they will all every year be getting the smoke detector tested within their building. Now, what I mean by collective buying power is, do those individuals tend to band together and try and negotiate a really good rate and get the same contractor to come out and spend a whole week there doing all of them in one go really efficiently, unpacking their tools on Monday and packing them up on Friday and getting, 10 or 12 done in a day? The answer is no, they don't do that. They just all run their own race. And the same would be true for people that want to get their carpets shampooed or want to have the split system air conditioner in their apartment that the manufacturer's warranty says you are required to get it serviced every single year. Whether or not everyone does it, I don't know. But to the extent that they do, I don't think they're coordinating with their neighbours. That's my general concept. If you can understand that as it applies to mandatory smoke detector testing and battery replacement, then you understand the concept generally. Band together, get a better efficient outcome, probably get a better rate, or get some other efficiency benefit or convenience benefit by banding together with your neighbours.
All right, so I'm going to invite you to explain how the strata manager benefits from arranging this. And I want to point out right up front, for those who may be having some bells ringing here, that one of the big criticisms of Net Strata in the big media cyclone of last year was that they had a wholly owned subsidiary fire services company called Windfire fully disclosed that is a wholly owned subsidiary of Strata. Is that the kind of thing that you're suggesting here, Chris? The strata managers go and set up these companies that can then service owners' corporations, or is this something different?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting, although I'm not allergic to that idea generally if it's done correctly and it's clear and it's transparent. I think there's real problems in that arrangement, which is different to what I'm describing. And the problem there is that it's the strata manager or a related party, the strata manager, arranging for essential work that the owner's corporation, really has no choice but to get done to the common property. And then the strata manager's role is supposed to be an arbitrator to make sure that they're getting proposals and getting the best value outcome and being presented with those options. Now, if the owner's corporation sort of has no choice but to do this and they really have no other avenue to do it but through their strata manager, I think it's much more difficult to manage that potential conflict.
Got it.
What I'm talking about is things that are behind the door services, things that owners are potentially going to have to do anyway. And I'm not really talking about setting up a business to be doing the fulfillment. I'm talking about providing a service to assist those owners to collaborate and to harmonise their activity so that they can open up bulk buying opportunities. Now, that would still mean that whoever's playing that role and creating that opportunity, they're more than likely going to source the contractors that are going to do the work. So, they still have the potential for conflicts that arise through that value chain, and they need to think about that and manage that. But really, the primary service that I'm describing isn't setting up a fire systems company to come and do the actual work. It is providing a mechanism to allow these people who would otherwise just run their own race to coordinate and open up collective buying opportunities.
Something that interested me in the white paper was you describing this as a little bit like a concierge service, and something that you've said, hey, this is super common overseas. If we look at the States, for example, they have these services for owners, whether or not it operates hand in hand with the community management service, which is their equivalent of strata managers. I'm not sure. You might be able to tell me, Chris. And you're asking the question, why aren't we doing that here? It could be theatre tickets. It could be, as you said, an end of lease clean. It could be a carpet clean, your aircon service. It could be restaurant recommendations. Is that more of the role that you see strata managers uniquely placed to be delivering those kinds of services?
It is more in that direction. That's essentially the concept that I'm trying to introduce in this white paper, is that there are other markets where it is not uncommon. In fact, it's expected that the equivalent of the strata manager really is doing far more than just managing the common areas. They are also providing, for those who wish to take up the service, they are also providing additional value add services for things that aren't just related to making sure the lifts go up and down and the carpets in the common hallway are shampooed. They're creating additional value and convenience for the residents within these buildings. And I don't know why it's not a feature here. I think it's starting to emerge in sort of pockets, but even where I've seen it, we've had buildings that we've managed, we've had full-time concierges based on site. Culturally, Australians are just not quite as, maybe they just don't know what to do with it, or they're just not as open to opening their lives up to these concierges, So the concierges tend really to just be people take your mail and greet you as you come and go. Whereas I think the real opportunity here is, no, let me help you with some of the other things that you're doing in your daily life anyway. And I sort of start by thinking about things that are specific to the property. Smoke detectors, air conditioning services, carpet shampooing, end of lease cleaning. That sort of relates to the property. But you don't have to think too hard, and you can expand that out a couple of steps further. Okay, well, a lot of people that live in apartments in the inner city are probably, working professionals. Do they get dry cleaning a lot? They probably do. I wonder how many of their neighbours get dry cleaning. Is there a way we could help collect all of that dry cleaning and take those orders and make it more efficient? Efficient equals cost effective for a dry cleaning business to come and collect them all on a Tuesday and return them all on a Thursday, and have people avoid the need to have to go and walk to the dry cleaner or drive and try and find a car park. They could have done it without it having to leave their apartment, and potentially they could get it at a better rate. A lot of these, people have said to me, it's kind of like the Uber Eats of sort of services, right? I'm like, yeah, it is, sort of. But the calculus in that arrangement is a person living in a property is prepared to pay a convenience tax in order to not have to, leave the house to pick up the pasta from down the street. So there's a convenience tax baked in. The retailer of that product is also having to pay a fee for that transaction being connected by an intermediary who delivers them. So it's actually not a win-win. It's sort of, people are prepared to accept it from the customer end because it's more convenient. They'll pay a tax for it. And the seller end, well, it opens up a market that they might not otherwise have had access to. So they're prepared to give a bit away. In a strata context, though, because you've got such high concentration of people, I actually think the opportunity is to change that calculus to be a win-win from each side of the transaction. The customer potentially doesn't have to pay a convenience tax. In fact, they might be able to get it to 10% cheaper because they're doing it with 50 other people in the same property. And the service provider might be prepared to give a discount, but actually they're getting a better return because they're coming and getting a big order all in one go in a more efficient way. Efficient equals more cost effective is the theory that I argue in my white paper, at least.
So how does the strata manager make money out of this? Are they getting paid by owners who want to tap into this service? Is it that they can justify these increased management fees overall because, hey, by the way, we do all these other things for you? How do you see the strata manager getting paid? And probably more importantly, who are they being paid by?
Yeah, great question. And look, I'm not going to do all the work for everyone in my white paper. I'm sort of asking questions.
Tell us how to do it.
The truth is, I think there's any number of different viable commercial models, all of which I think make a fair bit of sense, to be honest. I like the idea that your strata manager could just be a premium service provider and justify a higher fee and maybe have stickier clients. And people say, we love our strata manager. We get all these other great things. Cost of acquiring new business and the cost of keeping new business is expensive. Like there's a return just if you keep your clients happier for longer or if you can charge a premium fee for it. Other models that I think are probably more easy to sort of get your head around and have a more of a direct kind of return for the people involved. But incidentally, this doesn't have to be the strata manager either. I mean, I say people are involved in strata management. At the very least, they're in the box seat to understand the opportunity and try to work out how to get at it. But let's shorthand say the strata manager. So another model might be that people are paying, to have a subscription to have access to this service. They might just pay a fee of $40 a year or something like that, but they're getting all of the value of this convenience and then discounts along the way. It's just a direct user pay model. Or the third model, and a model that I'm probably most drawn to, is that you're just charging an administration on the transaction, or you're getting a fee from the service provider for basically taking part of their role, which is creating the market for them and then connecting the service provider with the customer in an efficient way. And that might include invoicing, collecting the payment, or organising access, or doing all of those various things.
Do you think the strata manager ends up in, or ends up remaining in, the tricky situation then where it is taking a fee from the service provider? Its client is the owner's corporation. It has a duty to act in the owner's corporation's best interest, and if we're talking about fiduciary duties, to not be paid by anyone other than their client. If in that third model, managers are then taking fees from service providers, aren't they stuck in that cycle about which so many have been so critical the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think you definitely need to navigate your way through there, being mindful of those pitfalls and challenges. That third model that I've described, the difference is the owner's corporation aren't paying. It is the individual owners who have decided, yes, I like the sounds of this offer that you're offering to assist in managing and organising all of the people who want to get their air conditioner serviced in November this year. That sounds appealing. Yes, I'm interested. I'd like to participate, and I'm prepared to pay the cost of that, or I'm prepared, I understand that the transaction is, instead of paying $250, you're getting it done for $180, and I understand that you're then getting $40 out of that transaction that you're earning as a fee for providing that solution. So to the extent that people are not bound into it. They're not forced into it. And the owner's corporation, when they're getting fire services or cleaning or whatever, they're effectively forced into that arrangement. They need to. They can't just say, "Oh, we've just decided we're not going to get our common property cleaned or insured, or we're just not going to get the fire servicing done." So there's not really an alternative where they just say, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do that." And the strata manager represents the owner's corporation, so they are sort of inherently in that conflicted position. If a strata manager, and there's questions about whether they can do this anyway. I mean, the management agreement doesn't pay for people's time and resources to be spent trying to do stuff that aren't related to the owner's corporation. So there's that complication too, and I acknowledge that. But to the extent that that person is offering additional services to individuals, owners, tenants, agents who are stakeholders in the building, where they're not forced into it, but they're able to see some value in an offer, then I think that is an easier conflict to manage around. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in your view. I mean, you might disagree with that.
Oh, look, as a lawyer, I suppose I think about the worst case scenario, which is the way that our brains work. What's the risk here? And what if you end up with a crappy service and owners aren't happy with the way their dry cleaning was done to the way their air conditioning was serviced? There is then, for example, a dispute between the owner's corporation and the owner about what really caused the problem with the air conditioning. You as a strata manager may end up in a really difficult position where you're having to advocate for your client, the owner's corporation, to say, no, not your problem. This is the lot owner engaged a dodgy service provider. And then the lot owner turns around and says, well, hang on, you told me, strata manager, to engage that dodgy service provider and you took a cut of the action. So you're immediately conflicted. And I mean, I would think that it might be an extreme situation, but that would really put your contract at risk. I mean, how can you continue to serve those two masters?
Yeah, certainly. So, that example you've given, I don't think that example works necessarily, but I take the point. The example doesn't work because it's not the owner's corporation. They're not providing a service to the owner. It is an owner has things that they have to do inside of their unit that have nothing to do with the owner's corporation.
Yeah, but every day owners do things inside their unit that have nothing to do with the owner's corporation, but then impact the common property or impact other owners.
Yeah, sure. So that's why I say I understand the point you're illustrating, but there are some things that are benign, I mean, I had my carpet shampooed or I had my dry cleaning done. You're absolutely right. If you're organising dry cleaning on behalf of a lot of people, I'm absolutely certain that you'll be getting people saying, I'm unhappy this stain wasn't here before. That's a problem. Well, I mean, that's life in the service industry. You've got to decide whether or not the value and the opportunity is greater than the pain in the neck of having to deal with the inevitable complaints and problems and things that people are unhappy with, or things that actually go wrong. I'm sure every time someone complains about the dry cleaning, it's not because they're a pain in the neck. Dry cleaners say they lose garments all the time. Stuff goes missing. Stuff gets damaged. I mean, they're the things that happen in the course of delivering any service. And if the opportunity is great enough, then you manage your way through those things.
So is Vantage, or maybe with other hats on, are you tapping into this opportunity already, or is this something that is on the horizon for 2025?
Yeah, we are, and we've been working on this for some time, actually. There's probably coming past 3 years of being really actively focused on trying to unlock this opportunity. So we've been running a pilot program in about 20-odd buildings in Canberra under a totally different entity. The entity is called Taylor Services. Mm-hmm. But we do go out of our way to disclose it anytime that there's an arrangement in place. So the owners corporation don't need to be involved they're not involved in the transactions, but we seek to get an agreement with the owners corporation to say, well, you're not paying for any of the work, but we're sort of communicating to the broader owner group in the context of having some relationship with the owners corporation. So we do contract with the owners corporation, but we make it very clear that there's a relationship. We make it very clear the nature of our business, that, we are intending to make money out of this, but that it is opt-in. There's no obligation from any owner or tenant who's not interested in it. They don't have to participate. They can just ignore it if they like, but we get the opportunity and right to put signs up in elevators and do various other things that help us to stimulate that attention or that interest when we're running a particular campaign. So we've been doing it for about 3 years.
And is that for the range of services that we've kind of been talking about today, a few different things?
it's been fairly limited because these things are actually hard to do, right? So it requires a lot of, or our approach at least, has required a great deal of technology development. So we've been running pilots and conducting experiments to help us inform how we need to enhance our technology to then come back and do it again. So a lot of the services we've delivered to date, things like air conditioning services and whatnot, whilst they've been very positively received and the outcomes have been very good, there's been a lot of manual work on our side with a lot of telephone calls and emails and the old-fashioned way of doing things. But that helps us gain the insights to, okay, how would a platform help us make a much better experience for users where they can book their slot, the slot then is no longer available for the next person who wanted to book their slot, and we can deal with payment and we can deal with all of that stuff and create some connectivity with the service provider so that they're able to show up to a building and it's very clear which units they're doing on which days and so on and so forth. So we're coming towards the tail end of that journey now. We're pretty well set up to scale this up. We feel like we've learned a lot and we've really well positioned ourselves to be able to exploit all of that learning. So 2025 is going to be a big year where we are expanding on the limited range of services that we've been providing to date.
Are you aware of any other strata management companies around the country doing a similar thing?
I'm not. I mean, you're part of the Strata ecosystem, so I don't know how often you've heard this, but I can say within professional strata management community, everyone has been talking about behind-the-door services since the day I started in this industry. There's always been this idea that there's this future state where we're able to cater for behind-the-door needs of owners and residents. A lot of people have given up on it. I've spoken to some of my contemporaries that they said, they just think it's a white elephant. It can't be done. So, many are called, few are chosen, I think is the answer. So I'm not aware of anyone who have approached it in the way that we've been approaching it. And I feel so far what we've done demonstrates a real appetite and a market there. And whilst I say, this stuff, the extra services might be radioactive, I can tell you the committees, providing they're made really clearly aware of what the strategy is and they get taken through the journey, they're really excited for it. They're like, that's great. What a great, unique opportunity in our building that some of the people who live here might be able to get stuff done and managed for them and reminded about stuff that's due and get it done cheaper. They see that as a real win. And the evidence from the experiments that we've run, we're generally able to demonstrate 25 or more percent, sometimes 30% of penetration for any particular campaign, aircon servicing, for example. People take that up within the building, typically, as I said, 25, 30%. That's enough to make that pretty viable. And we're able to demonstrate that between various different buildings, a fairly consistent rate. And we're also able to demonstrate from one year to the next that it wasn't a flash in the pan and then people thought, I did it last year, I'm not going to get it done again this year. So that sort of tells me for those limited services that the interest in the market is there. So, next year will be a big year for proving that out, I think. But, we talk a lot about services. We're creating this business a lot around things that you need to get done, services you need to get done in your unit. Then there's a lot of other opportunities. I mean, every unit in 300 apartment building, they all were built with the same dishwasher, right? Those dishwashers have an end of serviceable life, maybe 10 or 12 years or 15 years, whatever the case may be. It's a pretty good chance they're all going to need replacing around about the same time. Some people will live with it longer than others, but a lot of them will be looking to replace the dishwasher after 10 years. Can you imagine the collective buying power of having them all serviced in harmony is one thing, but can you imagine the collective buying power opportunity of saying, well, let's buy 200 or 300 of that model dishwasher and have them all installed at once? It's something that might be $2,000 or $3,000 with installation, might end up being half that, a third of that.
Not to mention the hours and hours of trying to work out what do I need, what do I want, where do I get it from? I've got to be home to have it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I accept that people will be offended at the mere notion that anyone would be looking at doing that. But at the end of the day, if the value of that is locked up, if they're going to be unlocked, it's not going to be because en masse individual owners and residents have decided to work out the tech required and the platform and the market research and unlock that opportunity in their one building. If it's going to be unlocked, it's going to require someone to sense the opportunity and then do the work to try to work out how best to unlock those opportunities. And that's where, whether it's a strata manager or someone else related to the strata management industry, that's where I think that's going to come from. And if people are offended by that, well, then that's okay. They can continue the way that they have been. But there'll be a lot of others who are like, yeah, you know what? I would like to realise the potency of my 300 other neighbours that all have to get the same thing done and get a better rate out of it or get a better deal out of it.
And I just want to acknowledge your approach to this. One of the big problems, those who are maybe thinking about this and saying, oh, it's not going to work, I suppose comes from how do we get into these buildings and how do we get residents knowing we have these services available? And what I heard you say earlier is you have a contract with the Owners Corporation that by the sounds of it allows you to then advertise your services, let them know when there's a campaign, you called it, we've got all these aircon servicing ready to go, we've got the dishwashers ready to go, we've got the dry cleaning service, whatever it is. You're right, you do need permission from the building to be able to offer that service. You get that permission from your client, the Owners Corporation, and then you have that separate legal relationship with the individual owners, and it's a matter between you and them how you're remunerated for providing that service, which might be directly they pay you a fee or you get a cut from the service provider. But from your point of view, that doesn't involve your client, the Owners Corporation. These are two separate but parallel services.
Yeah, that's right. You nailed it. That's why you're a lawyer and I'm a strata manager, because you know how to take my word salad and articulate it.
It's great. It's a very clever idea. I can certainly see the tricky nuances, which it sounds like you have identified and have been working through the last few years. And I'm really fascinated to see where you take it. I love a bit of creativity in this space. I absolutely agree that there are owners out there, I put my hand up, I'm one of them, who definitely want somebody to come in and handle all that stuff for me. And I'm the person who's happy to pay the convenience tax. But if I could save a bit of money in the process too, all the better.
Yeah, I'm a convenience tax person too. I mean, I shudder to think my Uber Eats bill over the last year, but not everyone is. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there's plenty who would just be happy to pay the convenience tax, but there's plenty who would just be happy to get something handled for them. There's a lot of stuff to think about in your life, let alone having to go, when's the last time I had my aircon serviced? I wonder if the manufacturer warranty requires me to do that. So this is a solution to people with busy lives that would otherwise do that if they were helped.
Where is the best place, Chris, for our listeners to go to have a read of your white paper, find out more, possibly get in touch with you?
So we've got the white paper is published on our website. I think we have a section on our website for white papers.
I'll make sure that we've got that and we'll put that link in our show notes for this episode.
And then, the interest of disclosure, we make it very clear in the white paper, the relationship with Taylor, and there's information about Taylor in the white paper itself. So if people are interested in taking that next step, well then if they get the white paper, then they can continue on to Taylor and make an inquiry about that.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining me, Chris Miller. Have a fantastic week in Strata.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. I'm looking forward to the spicy comments in your comments section after you post this one. Maybe
we might trade a few. You might get some too. Lots of ideas percolating. Let's put it that way.
That's right. Thanks, Amanda. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at yourstrataproperty.com.au.